My name is City Councilor at Large Michael Flaherty, the Chair of Government Operations, joined here by my colleagues, the author of Docket 1175, an ordinance establishing a Boston Trust Act, City Councilor Josh Zakem, also joined by my colleagues, City Councilor Sal Lamatina and City Councilor Michelle Wu. And we are here to discuss the ordinance that was sponsored by Councilor Zakem back on July 9th of 2014, a trust act that seeks to improve trust between law enforcement agencies and the immigrant community, as many immigrants have been hesitant to report crimes and cooperate with the police for fear of being detained. The Boston Trust Act would require that all ICE, that's Immigration Customs Enforcement, detention requests should be declined by the Boston Police Department unless the individual in question has been convicted of a serious crime or falls under the following conditions. There's a warrant out for that individual. The individual has been convicted of a violent crime. The individual has been convicted of a felony within the last 10 years. The individual is on the Massachusetts Sex Offender Registry, or the individual is on the federal government's Consolidated Terrorist Watch List. The Massachusetts Trust Act was introduced at the State House back in January of 2013 with no action from the state legislature. Thus, we are looking into a trust act as a city ordinance. And with that, just ask for everyone's cooperation. We have a full house. We're trying to move the hearing as quickly as possible. Those that are here offering testimony, we ask that you limit those comments to 2 to 3 minutes to accommodate everybody that has signed in to testify, and we have several sheets that have already been signed up. I'm going to introduce my colleagues and also the first panel. If you could start to make your way down while we're doing introductions. I see Rich Rogers here. If Rich could come down. I also just saw Alejandra Sankian. Where did Alejandra go? If Alejandra can make her way down. As also, we're joined by Deputy Superintendent Norma Ayala Leon from Major Case Division of the Boston Police Department. So if I could also ask Norma to join the first panel. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues for brief opening comments, and then we're going to go right to Rich Rogers as a professional courtesy, as he's got a very
Thank you very much. Right. Thank you very much, Chairman Flaherty. I very much appreciate it. There was a union rally down the street they'd missed me at, but I really appreciate it. Thank you to the other councilors, Councilor Zakem, my own councilor, Sal Lamatina, and Councilor Wu. For the record, my name is Rich Rogers, and I'm the Executive Secretary-Treasurer of the Greater Boston Labor Council. I'd also like the record to reflect that I'm a longtime Boston resident. I've been living in Charlestown for close to 20 years. Our council would like to be placed on record in support of the proposed ordinance establishing a Boston Trust Act. The Trust Act will help prevent unscrupulous employers from manipulating the current deportation machinery to undermine the exercise of workers' rights. All too frequently, employers use the threat of deportation to keep workers silent about workplace violations on the job. This Trust Act also is an important public safety measure. It'll preserve public safety resources to focus on fighting crime, gun violence, substance abuse, and other pressing public safety problems that Boston faces. It also plays an important humanitarian role in keeping struggling families together. Our council is proud to speak out on behalf of immigrant workers and join a growing chorus of labor, community, and workers' rights organizations across our nation seeking to address immigrant rights on the local level while we fail utterly in Congress with gridlock on immigration. I'd also like to bring to your attention some concerns raised by the Massachusetts Trust Act Coalition, which includes some of our affiliated unions, and right behind me, one of our strongest, Unite Here, Local 26, in force tonight. There's contentions that several of the exemptions in the ordinance may be constitutionally problematic. Not being an attorney, I don't know enough about it, but I do urge you to work with this coalition to find common ground, and you've already offered to do that, Chairman Flaherty. I appreciate that very much. But I also want to end by saying our position in support of the Boston Trust Act, it's supported by the National AFL-CIO. Rich Trumka, the president of the AFL-CIO, has been an outspoken advocate for immigrants' rights and immigration reform. He's gone all over this nation. So I'm really pleased that the City Council is taking this on, because someone has to act. If Congress doesn't act, it's great to know that the City Council and the Mayor of Boston plan to do something, take a right step forward. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for your testimony, Rich, and good luck this evening. And as always, you're excused, right? Thank you. Chair this time recognizes the lead sponsor, my colleague, City Councilor Josh Zakem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your help scheduling and arranging this hearing expeditiously. Really also want to thank Mayor Walsh and his team for their leadership on this issue, working together over these past few weeks to make sure we are able to get this bill forward through introducing the council to this committee and ultimately enacted into law and signed in a timely fashion, because this is a critical issue right now. I'm truly gratified that all of my colleagues on the council signed on in support of holding this hearing, of reviewing this bill at our council meeting a few weeks ago when it was introduced. It's another example, I think, of the unanimity on this body in the past year that we've seen when it comes to issues of equality and justice. And it's certainly very encouraging to me as a new member of this body to see that the City of Boston is represented by 13 individuals who truly care about the members of every community here. It's very encouraging, especially on issues like this. We introduced the Trust Act because it is very important to restore trust throughout all of our communities, particularly immigrant communities in the City of Boston. The Boston Police Department, our city government, all of our agencies have a duty and an obligation to protect everyone in every community. And we want to make sure that folks feel comfortable reporting crimes, being witnesses as necessary in those unfortunate circumstances, that they will not be penalized due to their immigration status when they come to the Boston Police, when they work with the police department, and making sure that message is sent loud and clear. This is an issue of civil rights and equality. Boston has a well-deserved reputation as a place where all are welcome, where we've led the way on issues of social justice, on civil rights, since before my time here, and hopefully continuing forward. We need to continue with that work to make sure that everyone feels welcome here. And beyond that, enforcing honoring a lot of these ICE civil detainers is a drain on the resources of the city. We just had a very intense budget session about a month ago now, and Boston has limited resources, and I certainly don't feel that it's the best way to spend them to enforce federal immigration laws, what are really civil violations. I don't believe that's the place for the Boston Police Department doing as a civil rights issue, but even as a issue of fiscal responsibility where we have limited resources in the city of Boston. I truly look forward to hearing from the panels tonight, from the administration, the police department, from all the folks here. I would also like to thank the Trust Act Coalition, certainly Local 26, SEIU 32BJ, and all the others, the ACLU, MIRA, who have been, and I'm sure I'm leaving some folks out, I apologize, but who have really been there every step of the way since we introduced this act, making sure we're understanding all the issues and how all communities are affected and how we can craft the best piece of legislation possible to serve our public safety needs, but also to make sure that everyone's civil rights are respected and that everyone can have trust in their city and their law enforcement communities. So thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Thank the chairman and my colleagues for their support on this, and I look forward to hearing from everyone tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor. The chair this time recognizes City Councilor Sal Lamentina.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming here tonight, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. Councilor Zakem, thank you for sponsoring this ordinance. For those of you who don't know me, I am Salvatore Lamentina. I am a city councilor for District 1, which represents the neighborhoods of Charlestown, the North End, and East Boston. It's a very dense and diverse district that has been home to people from all walks of life since our nation's birth. My home neighborhood of East Boston has seen a huge increase in the population of the Latino community, particularly those from Colombia. In fact, East Boston is home of the highest population of Colombians in the country. We also have a large residents from El Salvador, Honduras, and Peru, and along with a new wave of Middle Eastern people to go along with the Italians and the Irish who have been living there for decades. We've always been a community that embraces everyone and makes them feel welcome. Recently, however, what concerns me are the stories of victims of violent crimes who were afraid to call police due to the fear of deportation. Stories of women who have been sexually assaulted and abused. Stories of men who have been robbed on their way home from a long day at work. I have stories of residents who have their whole life savings robbed from them, but are afraid to report it because they are afraid that they will get deported. In many cases, the victims know who have committed the crimes, but are afraid to report it to the police. It's not right that many people in my neighborhood live in fear. Statistically, nearly half of those who have been deported have no criminal record. This has led to many families being ripped apart. All residents should feel safe in their communities and need to feel comfortable dealing with law enforcement. What I hope is accomplished today is a dialogue on how to ensure our neighbors that they will be protected. This act will help to restore trust between the communities and their local police, and it needs to be embraced by all of us. God forbid if there's a crime taking place and someone would not call the police because they fear that if they call the police that they might be deported. Immigration is by far the biggest issue facing our nation right now, and shame on the federal government for allowing it to get this far. America's current immigration system is dysfunctional, harms our economy, and does not reflect our Boston or national values, and the federal government inability to enact immigration reform has created several economic, cultural, and political strains here and across America. Local cities and towns shouldn't be called upon to fix the mistakes of Congress, and yet here we are doing just that. This ordinance makes sense, and it should be implemented, and thank you all for coming here tonight, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Martina. Chair recognizes City Councilor Michelle Wu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm so excited to see everybody here tonight. It's obviously an important issue for so many of our communities. I wanted to thank the lead sponsor, Councilor Zakim, for his leadership in drafting the legislation and moving the issue forward, to our chairman for scheduling a hearing so expeditiously, and to Councilor LaMattina and all of our other colleagues for their strong support, even when it was first introduced. I'm proud to stand with this council and the administration and all the advocates in making sure that Boston has a Trust Act and is taking action where the federal government has sadly left a big gaping hole. So I am the daughter of immigrants, and my family has lived some of the challenges that many of our immigrant communities face. We know very well many of the struggles. I also recognize how lucky my family is that my parents were able to immigrate to the United States and did so in a time before many of the recent clamping down and other unconscionable acts that have torn families apart and really brought harm to so many of our residents in our communities. So I do have to apologize that I will need to run shortly to another meeting that I couldn't get out of. I just wanted to state up front that I support the Boston Trust Act and passing a Boston Trust Act. I support working with the coalition, the Trust Act Coalition, and advocates to remove some of the exceptions so that Boston will have a version that is both constitutionally sound as well as accomplishing the objectives of protecting all residents. You know, there was an article that I hope someone will discuss later in the New York Times, really illuminating how so many jurisdictions across the country are now fully acting in not pursuing these ICE detainers and doing so at the protection of their own community. So I'm proud that Boston is taking a stand and taking a leadership role in this, and I will review the rest of the testimony afterwards, but thank you so much, everyone, for being here.
Thank you, Councilor Wu. And I have two letters I have to read into the record from our colleagues. This comes from City Councilor Mark Siomo, Boston City Council District 9, Alston, Brighton. Dear Chairman Flaherty, due to a prior commitment, I regret that I am unable to attend tonight's committee hearing on establishing a Boston Trust Act. I commend the author of this ordinance, City Councilor Josh Zakim, and share the common interest of restoring trust between Boston's immigrant communities and local law enforcement. As the chairman of the Committee on Ways and Means, I also share the concerns regarding the spending of scarce dollars from the city's operating budget upon federal requests. I will be sure to review the materials and testimony submitted during this hearing. Sincerely, Mark Siomo. And also from my at-large colleague, City Councilor Steve Murphy. Dear Chairman Flaherty, this memorandum is to inform you that due to a family commitment, I am regretfully unable to attend the public hearing regarding Docket 1175, an ordinance establishing a Boston Trust Act. I commend the author of this ordinance, City Councilor Josh Zakim, and his commitment to the role of immigrants play in our community. I support the proper and lawful execution of ICE-issued civil immigration detainer requests. The author's suggestion deserves a thorough discussion. It is my hope that this discussion held tonight moves our city forward to a fair resolution. Sincerely, Stephen J. Murphy, City Councilor at Large. So with that, we're going to start with our first panel, and I want to welcome Alejandra St. Guillen. If you could give opening testimonies, and as always, just introduce yourself and your affiliation, and then you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Wrong version. Chairman Flaherty and Councilors Lamatina and Zakem and Wu. First, let me take this opportunity to thank you for allowing me to testify today on behalf of the Mayor's Office of New Bostonians. My name is Alejandra St. Guillen. I am the director of that office, which was created 14 years ago to ensure that immigrants have full access to the civic, economic, social, and cultural life of Boston. MONB has established a nationally recognized model for assisting newcomers in overcoming the barriers and challenges of immigration. Over the past few months, we have moved some exciting initiatives within MONB, including the New Bostonians Fellowship, which is a program that is part of a new initiative to select and dedicate a staff member to expand and promote successful welcoming and empowering initiatives within Boston's municipal and resident communities. The New Bostonians Fellowship will act as a welcoming champion by helping develop a detailed and innovative action plan and generating awareness and support for the city's efforts to empower immigrants to fully participate in the social, economic, and civic life of the city. The fellowship will help research and implement successful immigration integration best practices, develop a campaign to help change the rhetoric about immigrants, and increase engagement and partner with organizations to facilitate workshops that offer leadership training for achieving more active roles on decision-making bodies. We have also recently announced that Boston is joining the Welcoming Cities Project, a national grassroots-driven collaborative that promotes a welcoming atmosphere and cooperation community by community. As part of this newly established partnership with Welcoming America, the City of Boston and the Office of New Bostonians will work to identify opportunities to engage the Boston's immigrants communities and further their roles in the social, economic, and civic life of the city. Key to the success of these initiatives and the full integration of immigrants into the fabric of the city is the ability of immigrant communities to feel safe in their neighborhoods and to be able to trust their local law enforcement. Mayor Walsh has already come out against Secure Communities as a federal program that shares fingerprinting information with ICE. He has also made it key, and Commissioner Evans has also made it clear from the beginning of this administration that the City of Boston is committed to public safety for all who live, work, and visit our city. As a city, we are committed to limiting unnecessary entanglement between BPD and federal immigration matters. We also believe the BPD's resources must remain focused on public safety. Although many in our immigrant communities know that they can trust BPD and have already cooperated with BPD to report and solve crimes, with the signage of a Local Trust Act, we send a clear message to the immigrant community that they have a friend and an ally in the Walsh and Evans administration. I would like to submit my support for the Local Trust Act.
Thank you very much, Alejandra. Any questions from my colleagues at this point?
I think not at this point.
Any questions? Good. Thank you. Great to see you, Norma. If you could just introduce yourself to folks here and your title and affiliation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, councilors. My name is Deputy Superintendent Norma Ayala Leong. I am Assistant Chief to the Bureau of Investigative Services with the Boston Police Department. I've been with the department for 32 years. I want to thank you for inviting the Boston Police Department to testify on this docket. And let me first say that the Boston Police Department supports the spirit of the Boston Trust Act, this proposed ordinance. The Boston Police remains focused on public safety as our main priority. The department works to ensure the safety of all the residents of Boston, regardless of their immigration status. We encourage all communities and community members to work with and cooperate with the department in ensuring the public safety at all times. Since January, the department has been working closely with the Office of the New Bostonians to develop detention practices that protect public safety for all of our residents, regardless of their immigration status. As the Boston Police mission states, we are focused on protecting and serving and are confident in our abilities to work with the immigrant communities on these policies. The spirit of the Trust Act makes it clear that the City of Boston and the Boston Police support the immigrant communities, but at the same time recognizes that numerous situations, specifically within the realm of public safety, call for the need for numerous tools. From a practical standpoint, the majority of these types of situations arise at the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office. And let me just explain. As a sergeant detective, when I worked in the fugitive unit, most of those ICE detainers are really lodged at the Nashua Street Jail or South Bay. I've not seen any lodged with the police department, mainly because once someone is arrested, we hold them for a very short time before they're brought to court. Once they're held on bail, and they will be held at Nashua Street usually, that's where the detainers are lodged. So I've not really seen, really, in my experience, any detainers lodged specifically with a Boston Police district. The department appreciates the work of the City Council as Boston's legislative branch on this vitally important issue, and we're willing to continue our collaboration as we move forward in ensuring that public safety for all residents is our top priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent, and I just concur with your opinion. In my days back in the DA's office, you just never really saw them.
Right.
But I guess the question I have, and based on your training experience, is there any estimate in the city of Boston as to how many crimes go unreported because there's, I guess, a lack of trust, if you will, from the immigrant community, and also further where we have a crime has taken place where an undocumented person is reluctant to cooperate or to come forward as a witness. Is there any data or statistics or real numbers that we could put behind that? The message I'd like to convey, and I've talked to some of the advocacy groups as much as we're talking about the Trust Act, I want this to be a two-way street. I want folks to know that we're stepping up and supportive of this, but we also want them to step up. We want them to call 911. We want them to reach out to you and to your colleagues to report crime and or to participate in that process as vital witnesses to help us make our community safer. And so how do we get that message out?
Exactly. And unfortunately, I don't have any figures as to, who's not calling because of their status. But I will say that I was in East Boston last night at a community meeting, and we try that, whenever we are at any of these community meetings to get the word out. So I think, and I'm happy to see so many people here, and I'm hoping that everyone here, each one of you takes back this message to your neighbors and your friends that, we want people to call us. We're not going to ask what your status is. We will ask you many questions about whatever the crime is that you're reporting or whatever your issue is, but your status as an illegal or legal immigrant is not one of them. So I think it's really working in conjunction, working with the neighborhoods to try to get the word out as best we can.
May
Thank
I
you.
say,
Yes.
I also think in another important point is that it's not just crimes that undocumented immigrants are not reporting, but also ISD violations, scams. They're subject to many crimes that may not necessarily be violent crimes that also go unreported because of fear of deportation.
And I agree. I think a lot of people prey on people that they know are not legal because they know they're not going to report. So, it's a travesty that someone will lose their life savings or something like that and are afraid to call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Deputy, and Alejandro for being here. It's always nice to have you back here. It was my very first committee hearing as a committee chairman was with Alejandro for a matter of a grant for the Office of New Bostonians. So it's always nice a few months later coming back, and certainly a few more people here for this hearing than the last one.
Nobody.
So two of us. But anyway, to the matter at hand, I appreciate your work with my office on this bill, and the mayor's support obviously has been instrumental, I think, in getting us this far. I guess my questions on this are, how impactful, I guess from both of your perspectives, on making sure that folks, because I know we hear, whether it's in the media or anecdotally, that folks are often reluctant to report crimes, regardless of status. I mean, that's a problem, I think, across the city. Is how important is this, and is it a matter of we passing this act and making sure it's publicized to make sure that folks are willing to come forward? Because just picking up the phone to call 911 anyway, I think, is not something most people do lightly. And to have sort of this specter of a possible deportation or ICE detainer hanging over their head, how much of an impact do you think this will have, and how important is it to public safety in the city? I guess if either Deputy, if you want to go first.
I mean, I certainly believe that if this goes through, I think that'll be a big step in getting people to be a little more comfortable. Like you said, sometimes it's not even people that are worried about their status. It's just in general, they don't want to call us. So, and I think that, since the Walsh administration and the new commissioner, the command staff specifically, we've been out there, we've been talking to people. We're just trying to be out there and have people comfortable talking to us, as well as our officers. We have officers, in the neighborhoods getting out of their cruisers, having conversations with people. And again, I think it's just getting them comfortable. That's the step in the right direction.
Yeah. I think a couple things. One, as Lieutenant Sergeant? Deputy Ayala mentioned that many of the ICE detainers are actually lodged when someone's already in the Suffolk House of Corrections. So crucial to this act and building trust will be that media part, and that our ability as as administrators to really go out into the communities, as counselors and staff to go into the community and let them know that this has passed. I also think that Boston, being the largest city in the Commonwealth, also sends a message about the importance of this, and also might open up for other jurisdictions to also pass their own versions that would impact the immigrant community.
No, I believe it was Councilor Flaherty who mentioned in the beginning the lack of action.
Yeah.
Certainly, we all know there's no action of any kind on any issue at the federal level. And at the State House, I believe it was the Globe this morning talking about there won't be any more action on a Mass Trust Act. So I think it is incumbent upon the city to do something. But how important is this? I mean, I talk frequently about how proud I am that Boston has a reputation of being a city that's welcoming to everyone, a place where people from all backgrounds and, from everywhere feel comfortable. And I think that's really important. I mean, and Alejandra, this is more in your purview, but in your experiences in this office prior, how important is sending this message to communities, not just in Boston, but sending the signal that we are a leader here and for the rest of the Commonwealth in New England?
Right. It is vitally important. Having been an advocate in the previous administration, I can tell you that I wasn't sure if this day would actually happen, and early on had been talking to counselors and administrators about this possibility, and I think that this is a testament really to the work of the advocates in the room who have really pushed forward and pushed through in a time where the rhetoric is very negative, incorrect for the most part. And so I think this sends a huge message that says, the whole city council is with you. Mayor Walsh is with your community, and we want you to be a part of Boston. Boston's a welcoming city, and it's one thing to join a coalition, and it's another thing or to join a national coalition, but it's a whole other thing to really put your money where your mouth is and say we will stand up and protect your right to be safe in your neighborhood regardless of status.
Well, thank you both for being here. I appreciate all the work you do every day for the city, but also helping us with this important issue tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes Councilor
Thank you.
Salamantino.
I think both you asked the questions I want to ask, but I think it's very important that we do have an education campaign if we pass this law, because the message has to get out there. And particularly in the Latino community, the churches, where hundreds and hundreds of residents go to church on Sundays, we need to get the word out there that they feel safe. And I think that the police is very important with this campaign. So I'm just hoping that the mayor's office will give some funding for a campaign, a public campaign, to get the message out there when this is passed.
I think also the media, not just the regular channels, but Univision, a lot of these other channels that I know my mom watches Univision all the time, so that's the way to get the word out. You need to be able to communicate how they're gonna understand.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you both for your testimony. Obviously, you're free to go, or if you want to stay and listen to other testimony, that'd be great. So great to see you both.
Thank you.
We're moving into the second panel. I see Henry Green. Where's Henry? Henry, come on down. Great to see you, Henry. Patricia Montes, Executive Director of Centro Presente. Is Patricia here? Laura Rotolo. Laura Rotolo, Staff Counsel from ACLU. Anilda Lovo. Is Anilda here?
Thank you.
Anilda Lovo, and I also see Carolyn McCooler. I don't know if you have signed in to testify or not, but if you want to make your way down here as well. So I know there's a lot of work in the immigration community, and someone I call regularly with immigration issues to lend her opinion as well.
Okay.
I'm just listening. I'm actually
Sorry. Great entrance.
beautiful music in the background. So, Henry, great to see you, my good friend. So, if you could just introduce yourself, organization you're affiliated with, and then you have the floor to offer testimony.
My name is Henry Green. I'm the Financial Secretary Treasurer of Boston's Local 26 Unite here. And I live on Galvin Boulevard in Dorchester. I've been living there for over 25 years. And previous to that, I've lived in Roxbury for about 20 years. So even though I'm a Southern boy by heart, born in South Carolina, I am a Bostonian. I'm here today to urge the City Council to pass the Trust Act, but first to amend it to only hold people who have open criminal warrants. The immigration right is civil rights in Boston, and it needs to join the growing nations of cities and counties across this country that are refusing unconditional detainees, individuals with criminal warrant. The members of Local 26 are overwhelmingly Boston resident and overwhelmingly immigrants. Excuse me. They work hard to ensure Boston runs smooth. They are the ambassadors of the city. They greet the visitors in the hotels. They welcome everyone to Boston and make sure that their stays are enjoyable here. Our members pay taxes in the city. They're productive citizens, and as a result of earning decent wages, our members help ensure the economy of Boston neighborhoods are strengthened. They support local businesses and are active in their community. Yet, some of our members are undocumented, and some of our members' families are undocumented. All are trying to gain documentation while they wait through the gridlock in D.C. And as a result of that happening, they have to live in fear in Boston. Please support the strengthening Boston's community and the workers who help make Boston strong. Please support passage of the Trust Act with amendments to only hold people with open criminal warrants. Thank you for taking the time to hear our testimony today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henry. Any questions?
I'll wait till
Okay. Patricia?
Sure. Good afternoon. My name is Patricia Montes. I am an immigrant from Honduras, Central America. I have been living in the city of Boston for the past 10 years, and I am the director of Centro Presente, that is a Latino immigrant rights organization. We recently moved to the part of Boston that is the most beautiful part, is Boston. And I'm here to support the ordinance. Obviously, our organization is an active member of the Massachusetts Trust Act Coalition. We have been doing a lot of work against secure communities. We have been doing a lot of work with the National Day Labor Organizing Network. That is the organization that have been coordinating this campaign at the national level. And why Centro Presente and the Massachusetts Trust Act Coalition is doing a lot of work against secure communities? Because there is a fundamental problem with secure communities when the data, the official data is telling us that most of the people that they are deporting with the implementation of secure communities are people who do not have criminal convictions. And we are actually using ICE own statistics to build a political, a moral, and a legal argument against secure communities. It is unacceptable when we see that in Massachusetts, 50% of the people that they are deporting are people who do not have criminal convictions. That's why we do have a problem with secure communities. So, and as you said, there is a problem at the national level. Obviously, the government is not taking action, but they are taking some actions. They have been deporting a lot of people. The Obama administration has a record on deportations, more than 2 million people deported. Most of them are people from Latin America. 97% are from Latin American countries. Most of them are people who do not have criminal convictions. At this moment, the U.S. government is detaining more than 34,000 people on a daily basis. They are deporting more than 100 people on a daily basis. And again, most of them are people who do not have criminal convictions. So as you all know, right now, the crisis with the unaccompanied kids is, again, putting the immigration topic into the public debate again. And I think that for us it's very important to educate people about the reasons why people are coming to the U.S. And why I'm talking about this, because the issue is connected. Sometimes for us, it's very hard to change public policy at the local level and to make what for us is just a tiny, tiny change in local policy, public policy. But it's significant for our community. And that's why it is very important to also educate people about the reasons why there are people coming to the U.S. without the proper documents, because there is a lot of misunderstandings about why people are coming to the U.S. without the proper documents. And in our opinion, right now, you have an opportunity in your hands to change the life of many people in the city of Boston, to work with us and make some changes. Obviously, the federal government doesn't have the political will to do something right now, but you can do it. You can work with us and make some positive changes. And actually, our coalition is advocating because we would like to see some changes in the language of the ordinance. And I know that Laura, who is a lawyer, actually is going to talk a little bit more about that. And we hope that you're going to work with us. I believe in democracy. And for me, democracy, and for many others, is when the people have the opportunity to engage in a conversation with our policymakers and together make better public policy for all of us, not just for a few, but for all of us, including undocumented people. So that's why I'm here, because we support this ordinance, and we hope that our local government is going to work with us in order to make better public policy for all of us. And please pay attention about the reasons why there are a lot of people coming from Central America right now to the city of Boston. They are not coming because they like the winter. They are not coming because they want to risk their life. They are coming because there is a lot of violence, there is a lot of narco activity, there is a lot of structural poverty in Latin America, and unfortunately, the policies that rich countries like the U.S. and many other countries have been implementing in Latin America for decades are connected with this, phenomenon. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Patricia. Laura?
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Chairman, Councilman Zachem, Councilman LaMattina, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today. The Council has taken an important first step here, and I congratulate all of the members for the support of the Boston Trust Act.
Laura, if I could just ask you, if you could just introduce yourself and state your affiliation.
Thank you. Of course. My name is Laura Rotolo. I am working for the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts. We are at 211 Congress Street.
Gotcha.
Thank you. The Council has taken an important first step here, but we believe that the ordinance must be amended to make it stronger and to bring it in line with the over 160 cities and towns and counties around the country that have passed similar policies. I want to be clear. Boston should refuse all ICE detainers unless they are accompanied by a judicial warrant, and there should be no exceptions. This is so for three very important reasons. Number one, the exceptions serve no public safety purpose. Number two, recent court decisions make clear that detainers themselves may be unconstitutional. And number three, only a no-hold policy is going to help build the trust of the community, as others will testify to today. Number one, in regards to public safety, Section 2 of the ordinance lays out 4 exceptions. Exceptions to the rule that Boston will not hold people on ICE detainers. They're about criminal convictions and statuses as sex offenders and members of the terrorism watch list. These exceptions are unnecessary to maintain public safety, and I want to explain why. It's important to be clear that ICE detainers take effect only after our Boston court systems have determined that the person may be released. And you heard from the Deputy Superintendent that this doesn't happen very often in Boston, but it does happen, and it can happen, that a person is arrested, a bail bondsperson or a bail commissioner will post bail or will allow that person to post bail. Every day, these bail commissioners, judges, and magistrates take into consideration dozens of factors, including the person's past crimes, the severity of the arrest, of the charges under which they were arrested, the person's connection to the community. They make these decisions about release every day, and that is their job. Prosecutors can even ask for a special dangerousness hearing if the person is dangerous and should not be allowed to go. The police should not second-guess this determination simply because there's an ICE detainer placed on that person. They should not continue to hold a person if the bail commissioner has allowed that person to go free, because ICE detainers are not a public safety tool. They are simply there to facilitate deportation. They are placed almost randomly on people and without any regard to their dangerousness. And they are simply a tool of the federal government, not a tool for public safety. The second point that I wanted to make is that it is becoming increasingly clear that ICE detainers may be unconstitutional, and counties and cities around the country are being sued and held liable for violating people's constitutional rights when holding them on ICE detainers. As you know, Somerville and Cambridge have already taken the first steps to put a hold on all ICE detainers, and I recently found out that Hampden County in western Massachusetts has stopped honoring all ICE detainers without any exception. Yesterday there was also an article in the New York Times which was mentioned about the New York State Sheriff's Association recommending to all of its sheriffs that they stop holding people on ICE detainers at all. Only a policy that refuses all ICE detainers would be constitutionally sound and protect the city from liability. And lastly, I just want to say what others will echo today, that a clear policy is the only way to really rebuild trust with the immigrant community. So I want to thank you all for your support, and I hope to work with you in the future to make this a stronger ordinance.
Thank you very much, Laura. Anilda Lovo, if you could introduce yourself, your affiliation and your address.
Okay.
I'll translate for you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yep.
Okay. Buenas noches, mi nombre es Enilda Lobo. Trabajo como organizadora comunitaria en Nube, Vecinos Unidos para un Mejor East Boston.
My name is Enilda Lobo. I live at 184 Bennington Street in East Boston. I work as a community organizer at Nube, which is Neighbors United for a Better East Boston.
Soy salvadoreña. Mi familia y yo vivimos la guerra civil en El Salvador. Perdimos muchos familiares, pero también contribuimos a la reconstrucción del país a través de nuestro trabajo social.
I am from El Salvador. My family and I lived through the Civil War in El Salvador. We lost many family members, but we also contributed to the reconstruction of our country through our social work.
Ahora soy una madre inmigrante que lucha cada día junto a la comunidad por lograr una comunidad que contribuya a la economía de este país a través del trabajo diario.
Today, I am an immigrant mother who struggles every day together with a community for a community that contributes to this country's economy through our daily work.
Y quiero exponer a ustedes el por qué es importante que aprueben el acta de confianza local.
I want to talk about why it is important for the Council to pass the Boston Trust Act.
Como organizadora comunitaria, a menudo escucho quejas, testimonios de la comunidad sobre asaltos, intentos de violación, violaciones y cómo están entrando a las casas a robar sus pertenencias.
As a community organizer, I often hear complaints from the community about assaults, rape attempts, rapes, and home break-ins to steal property.
Mucha de nuestra gente tiene miedo a llamar al 911 o a la policía por temor a ser deportados, y eso convierte cada vez más insegura nuestra comunidad.
Many of our people are afraid to call 911 or the police for fear of being deported, and that makes our community less and less safe.
Creo firmemente en la justicia de este país, en el respeto a los derechos humanos, y por eso pido tomen acción en aprobar el acta de confianza local y que consideren los cambios que se han propuesto hoy para aclarar el lenguaje y asegurar que Boston no va a cooperar con ICE.
I believe strongly in the American justice system and in human rights. For this reason, we ask that you take action to pass the Boston Trust Act and consider the changes that have been proposed tonight to clarify the language and ensure that Boston will not cooperate with ICE.
Por lo tanto, se debe considerar la importancia de esta propuesta que vendría a mejorar la seguridad en nuestra comunidad y así continuar el desarrollo y crecimiento de este país.
I hope you will consider this important ordinance, which will help improve safety in our community and assist in the development and growth of this country.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anilda.
Thank you.
And Carolyn, you see this play out on a day-to-day basis in the courts. If you can introduce yourself and your residents, and feel free to give your thoughts and comments.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much, Councilman. Thank you for taking the time for such an important hearing tonight. And Councilman Zakem, thank you so much for sponsoring this Trust Act. My name is Carolyn McCullough. I am an attorney. I practice criminal and immigration law. My law practice is in Everett, so that's in Middlesex, but I'm a resident of Boston, and many of my clients are residents of Boston, so I can tell you firsthand the type of impact that secured communities has on immigrants living in Boston. There's three things that I'd really like to point out tonight. First, secured communities has not met its stated goals. Not only is it not meeting its stated goals, but it's actually having worse side effects. And third, I believe secured communities is unconstitutional because it leads to ICE detainers. There has been a very interesting study that was conducted by Syracuse University. They got statistics on the type of crimes that have led to deportations through secured communities. They got these statistics through FOIAs that were issued to the Department of Homeland Security. The number one reason that people have been deported through secured communities is immigration violations. No crime at all, just pure immigration violations. Second is traffic offenses. One of the biggest traffic offenses that I see personally as an immigration and criminal attorney is driving without a license. People don't drive without a license because they want to commit a crime. They drive without a license because they're here to work so they can support their families. So they're driving to take their kids to school and to go to work, the same reason that we drive every day. But when they do that, just living their daily lives, they're committing a crime. And through secured communities, unfortunately, that crime has been the number 2 cause under the category of traffic offenses that has led to deportation through secured communities. Number 4 is marijuana possession. Not distribution, but simple marijuana possession has been the number 4 reason that people have been deported. My biggest concern for the marijuana possession is kids that have been granted deferred action for childhood arrivals, the dreamers. College-age kids that are smoking some pot and are now subject to deportation. And also, marijuana possession is considered a misdemeanor that can get them deported, and they're already known to the Department of Homeland Security because they have Docket status. So I really get concerned about these kids that are making just simple young kid mistakes, and that can lead to them going back to a country they haven't been to since they were 5 years old. So as you see, these aren't serious crimes. This is traffic offenses, no crime at all, just mere immigration violations, and marijuana possession. These are the 3 biggest reasons that people are getting deported under secured communities through these FOIA results. This is not meeting the stated goals of secured communities. We were told the stated goal of secured communities was to prioritize the removal of criminal aliens, those who pose a threat to public safety, repeat immigration violators, and the most dangerous and violent offenders. Mere immigration violations, traffic offenses, and marijuana possession. That's not the most dangerous and violent of offenders. If you look further down on the list, number 20 is domestic violence. Compared to traffic offenses, immigration violations, we finally get to domestic violence, something that is a cause for concern, all the way down at number 20. Why is this so low? Because women are scared to call the police and report when they're a victim of domestic violence. I've had women come into my office looking to retain me as an attorney because they think they have to hire an attorney. They're scared to call the police. They don't call 911. They want to come talk to somebody. They're worried If my husband gets deported, who's going to raise these kids? I'm going to be stuck alone. They're scared to call the police, and notarios prey on this, prey on people coming in and hiring them so they can get a restraining order or they can get assistance with the police. They come from countries where they couldn't trust their government. That's why they're here. And now they're here and they're scared to call the police. So I think that's really a cause for concern that domestic violence is so far down on the list. I'd like to just quickly tell a personal story about the side effect of secured communities and how it can destroy families. I know a man that came to the United States over 10 years ago, and he came through Mexico. He entered without inspection. That's an immigration violation. It's not a crime. My grandma came very similarly to the United States, but she came on a boat. She didn't walk, she came on a boat. And he lived in the United States for over 10 years, started his own company as a carpenter, paid his taxes, worked hard, had 3 United States citizen children with his wife, all under the age of 5. As a carpenter, most of his clients were Americans who benefited from his work as a carpenter. And he was picked up. He drives a van. He's scared to have it registered under his own name. Most immigrants, if they have a company, they register their cars under the company name, thinking that'll help protect them. It actually sometimes causes things to be worse because they drive a van in an immigrant neighborhood, and then the police run the plates, and the van is registered to the company. Telltale sign. The police pull them over, driving without a license. They have a reason to arrest them. They run them through secured communities. Oh, you have a deportation order from well over 10 years ago. Doesn't matter that the crime you committed was driving without a license. Doesn't matter no prior record. Doesn't matter 3 United States citizen kids. That man was deported. And the mother is now raising those 3 daughters under the age of 5 alone, had to apply for public assistance for housing, food stamps, before the family was fine financially. She was a stay-at-home mom, and then she had to become a house cleaner, working crazy hours, trying to raise kids. How does she have a babysitter when she's working those crazy hours? So she's living off of public assistance. How does that benefit our Commonwealth? It doesn't. How is that deporting the most violent offenders? Lastly, I just wanted to quickly discuss the fact of immigration detainers. I believe they're unconstitutional. If you're holding someone merely because of an immigration violation is not a crime, so you do not have probable cause to hold them based on a crime at that point. The Third Circuit says that they're voluntary, and so many sheriffs have begun to stop holding people on immigration violations to avoid liability. And federal district courts have ruled that they're unconstitutional based on the Fourth Amendment. I can tell you through my experience in the criminal courts, I've had clients that have elected to remain in Nashua Street because they know the second their family pays, and I've actually had to ask judges to put a low bail amount as opposed to personal recognizance. The judge was going to give personal recognizance. It's something like RMV fraud, very nonviolent crime, released on personal recognizance. I've had to ask the judge, please give a low bail amount, because I knew they would be immediately taken to ICE custody and that they would be judged on this immigration charge in immigration court. The immigration judge can deport them based on that charge. It doesn't matter, there's no conviction. And it's nearly impossible to get them haved out back into criminal court so that they can fight the rest of their case. So they elect to stay in Nashua Street to fight out their case and actually get their due process rights so that when they do go into the immigration system, we can say to the judge that their case was dismissed. I had a client whose case was dismissed for RMV fraud, completely dismissed, sat in Nashua Street for 2 months while his wife was pregnant. Luckily, we got him out 2 weeks before his baby son was born. So that's a successful case. But he sat in jail for 2 months and the case was dismissed. So how is that due process? So I think that secured communities is creating so many problems in our Commonwealth, in our justice system, and I think that the Trust Act is going to really solve a lot of these problems and help our due process rights and help our Commonwealth. Thank you so much for taking the time to hear me out.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. Any questions of the second panel from
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank everyone for being here. It's been a pleasure to work with a couple of you and many of the other allies and advocates who are in the room tonight on this legislation, and I look forward to continuing to work with all of you on possibly making some changes and making sure that we do have the best form of legislation available that this council can then vote on and that Mayor Walsh can sign to make sure, as you said, make a real difference in people's lives in the city of Boston. I think we're often talking about big issues here, and immigration is nothing's bigger, and to be able to have a positive impact on that is incredibly important. So I do want to thank you all for being here and for taking the time and for your years of work on this issue. I look forward to continuing this discussion. I look forward to hearing from the public also tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, councilors, for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That will conclude the second panel. So now we're going to go into public testimony. So I'm going to call out 10 names, and the first 5 names I call, if you could come to this podium, and then the second 5 names, if you could come to that podium, and just ask that you keep your comments to about 2 minutes, so we could go through several pages of public testimony. So Claudia Osario, Christian Morales, Natalicia Tracy, Biolian Kwang, and Helosia Galvea. So hopefully I'm pronouncing that correct. Belvo, my apologies, Belvo. Over to this podium, and then the next group will be Darnell Johnson, Shannon Irwin, Andres Del Castillo, looks like Nina Estrella Luna, and Lisette Lee. And if I can just ask everyone to introduce themselves in any your affiliation and your address. Get started. You take the floor.
Hi, my name is Claudia Osorio. Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Claudia Osorio y soy miembro y voluntaria de Boston en Acción. Oh, I'm sorry. Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Claudia Osorio. Soy miembro y voluntaria de Boston en Acción y quisiera dar testimonio del impacto que tiene la participación de Boston en el programa de comunidades seguras en nuestra comunidad.
Good afternoon. My name is Claudia Osorio, and I'm a member and volunteer at South Boston en Acción. I would like to give testimony of the impact in our community of Boston's participation in the Secure Communities program.
Desde South Boston en Acción hemos escuchado directamente desde las personas afectadas. Es claro que las detenciones a nombre de la migra hace confusa la línea entre la policía y ICE.
At South Boston en Acción, we have heard directly from those affected. It is clear that the detentions on behalf of ICE blur the line between Boston Police and ICE.
He escuchado casos donde las mujeres son sometidas sexualmente, económicamente, psicológicamente, físicamente por el abusador bajo la amenaza que si no soportan y obedecen van a llamar a la policía y esta a su vez la va a entregar a ICE, separándola de sus hijos.
I've heard cases where women are subjugated sexually, economically, psychologically, and physically by the abusers under the threat that if they do not obey and live in this situation, the abuser will call the police, so the police will deliver the women and mothers to ICE, separating them from their children.
Este programa pone a las mujeres en mayor riesgo, ya que la mayoría tiene miedo de acusar a su abusador a las autoridades.
Secure Communities puts women at higher risk, as most are afraid to accuse or report their abuser to the authorities.
Un caso que me conmovió mucho fue el caso de un joven de 25 años que creció toda su vida viendo el abuso sufrido por su mamá y con el miedo al hombre que golpeaba a su mamá y de la policía que podía llevarse también a su mamá.
A case that shocked me was the case of a 25-year-old young man who grew up all his life seeing the abuse suffered by his mother and the fear of the man who abused his mother and the police who could take her away.
Por esto y muchos más, estas detenciones en nombre de ICE no protege a nuestras familias emigrantes, ha destruido nuestra confianza y nuestra cooperación con la policía local. Fomentan los perjuicios raciales y tienen un impacto dañino en las víctimas de violencia doméstica.
For this and many other reasons, these detentions on behalf of ICE do not protect our immigrant families. They have destroyed our trust and cooperation with local police. They promote racial prejudice and have a harmful impact on victims of domestic violence.
Por último, como madre de dos jóvenes, les pido a ustedes que son padres de familia, que acaben con estas detenciones que causan tanto temor a nuestras familias. Thank you.
Thank you.
Finally, as a mother of two young men, I ask you who are parents to end these arrests that cause so much fear in our families. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I see that we're joined by my colleague, City Councilor Ayanna Presley, City Councilor at Large. Christian Morales. Christian, step up. Introduce yourself if you would mind, any affiliation and your address, and try to keep your comments to 2 minutes would be great.
All right.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Christian Morales. I live on Falcon Street in East Boston. I'm currently a volunteer in Nubes, Neighbors United for a Better East Boston, and I'm here to urge City Council to pass the Local Trust Act. As an immigrant myself, I have experienced and witnessed the public safety concerns in my city of East Boston. This is not an issue that concerns only the immigrants, but my entire community. I want to share with you a story of one of my neighbors who was afraid to call the police and even tell her story due to the fear of deportation. Her story is one of many in my community of East Boston. On March 2014, she was walking home on Princeton Street, pushing a baby carriage for her 2-year-old daughter. She was brutally attacked from behind by a man wearing a black hoodie. He pulled her pants down and forced her to the ground. She managed to scream, and 2 men came to help her. The attacker fled as she saw the man coming to her rescue. She was crying and shaking as the men asked if she wanted to go to the police station for a report, but she said no. She refused to go because of her legal status. She lives in traumas and refuses to use any resources available for her because of fear of deportation. Unfortunately, her story is one of many in my community that fear of deportations, they don't feel safe to call the police when they witness or become victims of a crime. No one should feel too afraid to call the police, and the federal programs that link immigrant concerns with local enforcement lead to increased distrust between immigrant communities and the police department. Please support strengthening Boston communities and keeping them safe by supporting the passage of the Trust Act and the amendments to only exclude people with open criminal warrants. Thank you for hearing and taking the time for my testimony.
Thank you very much, Christian. Natalicia Tracy, looks like. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. First of all, I want to thank you for your time and for listening to us, because we are in a community every day, and every day we see the struggles, the tears, and the fear that this program, the lack of having something in place to protect families, causing. My name is Natalicia Tracy. I am the Executive Director of the Brazilian Immigrant Center. We have about 200,000 immigrants living in the state of Massachusetts, and we see about 4,000 of them every year. A lot of them are families with children born and raised in this country. Most of them are people who are working very hard, but they're being terrified every day by secure communities, by this not having any protection, afraid of calling the police in a case of emergency. A quick story is someone living very close to the center, right near Alston Avenue, on Harvard Ave in Alston, not too far from here. Her husband was not feeling well, and she had to call the emergency. And the result of that is because he was undocumented, he ended up being in the deportation process. We understand that we believe in democracy, we believe in fairness, we believe in opportunity, and we also, this is a country of immigrants. So I truly appreciate you taking the time to really understand the issues and the lives that are at stake here, and taking the time to listen to us and really passing the Trust Act in the city of Boston. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Bowlin, am I saying that correct? Bowlin, thank you very much. Kwong, just introduce yourself, if you would mind, for the record, any affiliation and your address. Thank you.
大家好，我叫鄺寶蓮，我住喺南波士頓。
Hi, my name is Bowling Kwong. I live in South Boston.
我同時都係華人前進會嘅組織者。
I'm also an organizer with the Chinese Progressive Association.
咁前進會咧係華人社區嘅基層機構，咁我哋係為啲華人爭取平等權益，同埋協助啲華人移民認識參與社區。我哋同時都係居成權聯盟嘅一份子。
The Chinese Progressive Association is a community-based organization based in Chinatown. We work with many immigrants, Chinese immigrants, in fighting for their rights and helping them understanding their rights in, American society. And we also part of the right to the city.
咁樣咧，我哋代表前進會喺度好多謝市長佢哋推動市議會又通過呢個信任條款。咁我哋認為咧，波士頓係一個多元化嘅城市。咁好開心聽到我哋啲領袖咧係支持呢個移民權益嘅，因為咧呢個會令到我哋嘅城市咧更加安全同埋成功嘅。
First of all, I would like to thank the council and the mayor, your initiative in trying to pass the Trust Act. We know that Boston is a very diverse city, and I'm really happy to hear our leadership in the city is supporting immigrant rights because that will make our city more successful and safer.
咁自從08年之後咧，波士頓最早開始實施呢個社區安全呢個試點之後咧，但係嘅事實證明呢個項目冇令到我哋覺得住喺呢度越嚟越安全，反而令到扣留好多人咧都係嗰啲冇犯罪記錄嘅無證移民。
So starting 2008, Boston participated in the pilot program called Secure Community, and it actually this Secure Community program did not make Boston feel safer. In contrast, that program actually detained a lot of people who were without criminal backgrounds, and they're just simply undocumented.
呢啲扣留呢啲無證移民，反而令到好多家庭咧破碎，咁樣咧都對社區好大嘅影響咯。
So because a lot of these undocumented immigrants were detained, it created a lot of hardship for themselves and their families, and it has a very negative impact in the community.
咁啲無證人士咧都係我哋社區入邊最脆弱嗰啲人，咁佢哋如果警察同移民局一齊合作嗰時，會令到佢哋覺得好驚。
So undocumented immigrants are the most vulnerable population, and if they hear that the police and immigration are cooperating, that would create a lot of fear. That's unnecessary.
佢哋都好努力工作，同埋佢哋好努力去工作。佢哋但係如果喺工作上或者佢住屋方面咧遇到好唔公平嘅對待嗰時，佢就因為呢件事唔夠膽出嚟出聲，就係咁俾人剝削啦。
A lot of our immigrant population, they work really hard, documented or undocumented, and they face, a lot of issues in housing or work, and if, we don't want them because of the fear, they would not stand up for their rights, and that, in fact, and they would be, exploited.
就算佢哋見到可能有啲罪案就要嚟發生，佢哋都唔夠膽報警，所以反而令到波士頓會覺得個安全受到威脅。
So if immigrants are afraid report crimes to the police or law enforcement agency, it would make the city more unsafe.
所以我哋喺度大力支持呢個條款可以通過，因為佢係支持移民權益嘅一樣嘢咯。
And that's why we're here to support the Trust Act, but with no exceptions, because we feel that this is, a support for immigrant rights.
依家全美國已經有好多個城市已經通過呢個，同埋我哋附近嘅城市 Somerville 同 Cambridge 已經通過，我都希望我哋波士頓可以快啲通過。
As mentioned earlier, many cities in the U.S. Passed, the Trust Act, and even in nearby in Cambridge, Somerville also passed the Trust Act. And I hope that we'll have that in Boston as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony, Pauline. Heloisha? Also, if you could state your name and address and any affiliation.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Eloisa Galvão. I live at Atwood Square in Jamaica Plain. I am a co-founder and the executive director of the Brazilian Women's Group, located at 697 Cambridge Street in Brighton. According to the U.S. Census American Survey, Boston is home to the largest Massachusetts Brazilian population. I am here to urge city councilors to pass the Trust Act with no restrictions, but for criminal warrants. This city must set an example to the whole state and the country. Exclusion and injustice are unacceptable. People should not shy away from authorities for fear of being separated from their families. And to make my point, I want to share a story. In one frigid January night, about 4 years ago, a Brazilian woman who is a member of the Brazilian Women's Group fled her Austin home. Let's call her Maria. Maria wore only her nightgown and sandals. She fled for her life and disappeared into the night. 2 days later, her daughters called the Brazilian Women's Group and reported that their mother hadn't been heard of for 48 hours. We advised the daughters to go to Bright Police Department and report their mother as missing. They freak out. Both daughters had small children, and they were terrorized that going to the police meant to be taken by ICE. They also feared that the mother would be turned over to ICE if she reported her husband's aggression. The daughters decided not to take the risk. They locked themselves inside the house, and they waited. Maria appeared 5 days later. She had hidden a friend's house and pleaded with her friend not to tell anyone, not the priest, not the daughters, not the Brazilian Women's Group, where she used to volunteer on a daily basis. Both the daughters and the woman were in panic. They were sure if they had gone to the police, they would have been turned over to ICE due to secure communities. Meanwhile, the abuser called the police and reported his wife as the aggressor. So when Maria reappeared, she found out she was not a victim of domestic violence, but she was the aggressor. I want you to put yourselves on this woman's shoes, and I wanted to ask you all to reflect for a moment. Is this the kind of community we want to live in? When one person is fearful and insecure, the whole community is at risk. This is why I'm urging you to pass the Trust Act ordinance with no restriction for the safety and well-being of every Boston neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Darnell Johnson, is Darnell here? No, Darnell's not here. Shannon Irwin. Hi, Shannon. Shannon, if you could just introduce yourself, your affiliation and address.
Good evening. My name is Shannon Irwin. I'm an attorney with the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition, or MIRA. We're based at 105 Chauncey Street in Boston. And a large plurality of our membership is also based in Boston. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify in this important matter this evening. We so much appreciate at the MIRA Coalition the leadership that you've shown, Councilor Zakem, and the fact that there's unified support and concern clearly on the Council about the harm that ESCOM has done to our community safety. I'm here also to reiterate the ask that you heard from Attorney Rotolo, that the language as it stands of the ordinance be amended in order to effectuate the goals excuse me, of protecting residents' constitutional rights, of protecting our city from legal liability, and of truly ensuring that the community can feel safe coming to the police and that we don't hear stories like the ones you just heard. Anytime an ICE detainer is honored in the absence of a judicial warrant, a criminal warrant signed by a neutral magistrate, the Fourth Amendment requirements of probable cause for arrest and detention are implicated. And effectively honoring a detainer in this circumstance constitutes a new arrest and detention. Recent court decisions have shown that when this Fourth Amendment inquiry takes place, an ICE detainer in the absence of a criminal warrant signed by a neutral magistrate does not constitute probable cause. And accordingly, cities can be held liable and can have to pay damages to those whose constitutional rights they violate. There are really no exceptions to this rule. And so Mira echoes the recommendation that the exceptions in the current ordinance be eliminated, as they could violate individuals' constitutional rights and unintentionally leave our city open to liability. I want to briefly highlight one of the exceptions in the ordinance in particular, the terrorist watch list exception. Because its language references national security, and because we know that historically it is often national security concerns that are flagged in arguments that perhaps our constitutional requirements don't apply the same as they normally do. But our Constitution has served us very well over the last entire history of our country. And the Fourth Amendment continues to apply to everyone, regardless of whether their name appears on the terrorist watch list. In fact, the terrorist watch list is a very sprawling list onto which hundreds of thousands of names have been added annually for the last several years. Nearly 500,000 names were added in fiscal year 2013 alone. And we know from community reports and civil rights groups research that often inclusion of somebody on the terrorist watch list is actually used as a tool by the FBI to coerce that person, pressure them to become an informant on their community. In fact, a federal court in Oregon just last month held that the redress procedures for the terrorist watch list violate the Constitution because there is no meaningful process by which to challenge your inclusion on the list. I mention this not because the terrorist watch list is the only concerning exception in the language as it stands, but only because it's an exception that's likely to trigger particular fears and emotions, and we wish to be on the record that this exception, like all of the exceptions, are not needed, as Attorney Rotolo made clear in her testimony about the bail process. And Mira therefore really encourages you to think about amending the current language to get rid of those exceptions and to require that in order for an ICE detainer to be observed, there needs to be a judicial warrant issued, signed by a neutral magistrate. Once again, thank you so much for your clear concern about public safety, about community rights, about community police relations. We really appreciate your leadership, and we look forward to working with you to ensure we have a policy in place that effectuates your laudable goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Andres de Castillo. You can state your name and address and any affiliation.
My name is Andres del Castillo. I live in Councilor Lamatina's district in Lexington Street in East Boston. I'm a community organizer for City Life Vida Urbana, and I'm here today because this issue affects me both personally and professionally, I guess I would name it. It's hard to say professionally because this is a human issue. It really is beyond the political scope. But I want to talk, initially I heard how you brought up the amendment, and you were talking to us, Councilor Flaherty, and you talked a lot about establishing trust in the immigrant community. And our community isn't one that's isolated, right? Our community exists with the rest of the Boston community. So the insecurity that we feel is an insecurity that is rippled throughout the rest of the city. And the insecurity that our youth feel is an insecurity that is rippled throughout the city. Councilor Zachem, I heard you speak a lot about civil rights and how important it is to uphold civil rights. And I think the amendments that are included in this speak very on the contrary to what you were saying. Because if it is a matter about civil rights, then due process should be in that. Due process should be absolutely protected without a doubt. And I think that the attorneys have done a really eloquent job and a much better job than I can do at explaining why that is so. And I think that you all should take very seriously if in fact civil rights is something you care about, if in fact this issue is so important that there is unanimity, that there is so much support in the city council, and that there is so much support from the mayor's office, that it stands to be actually effective, that it stands to send the right message. Particularly because Boston represents a political and historic moment for the Secure Communities Program and for the Trust Act. And that's because in 2006, we were the pilot program. We volunteered for this program under Mayor Menino. We said, pick us, start here. And it was in this city that we implemented the program for the first time and then spread it around nationally. It was this city that opened the gateway for the injustices that you've already heard plenty of. Now, as a community organizer, I work with dozens, if not hundreds of people, most of which are immigrants, most of which live in the community of East Boston. A lot of these folks are not only facing gentrification and the displacement, which I highlight the Councilor Ayanna Presley for working diligently on in trying to challenge those issues in the city. But as folks are being displaced, their commutes to work, because they are still a committed and strong labor force in the city, they have to commute much longer trips. A lot of times without a lot of access to the MBTA. And what does that mean? That means that they're forced to figure out driving without a license to support the labor force of this city, to keep this city running and to keep their families fed with a roof over their head. Now that means they're driving without a license, and that exposes them to the effects of secure communities. So the issues that are going on politically in our city outside of immigration greatly affect this same issue. And so we need to look at our policies holistically. 166 localities have passed legislation similar to this one. Over 100 of those same localities have passed legislation that has absolutely no exception. So Boston does not stand alone. Boston is not setting some sort of miracle example. It does not need to say it's going out on a limb. No, in fact, it is following a momentum of advocates and grassroots push that has really labeled out the injustices which you've heard a lot about today. And so I don't really feel and believe that there's any wiggle room for us to justify evading or avoiding the due process of every person who encounters our law enforcement. Now, to speak to the cases I see, first, I'll start personally. My mother was undocumented in this country for over 27 years. That meant she was asked for her papers by both local Boston police, MBTA officials, and many other people. And we went through many, many scares as a family. Now, my mother was lucky to have a son who turned out to be a community organizer. So I was able to let her know what her rights were. I was able to make sure she carried in her wallet, her purse, a little card that said what her rights were in English so that she could just hand it over to anybody who ever questioned her. That's not the case for most of our community. That's not the case for most of my community. Friends of mine who've been held in solitary and detention center. Friends of mine who've been stopped without a license and have been taken as soon as they're walking out of a hearing room for that offense are being waited for ICE. One of my friends, her son, Ernesto, who's probably like 7 years old, he said, you ask him, he says he doesn't like the police. You ask him why? He said, because they try to take my mom. And I want to let you know that the effects that secure communities has had in our community are going to have long-term effects on our youth. This act is merely a stepping stone in the direction to address the trauma that has been caused to our youth. U.S.-born children of undocumented peoples represent, or of mixed status family, represent 350,000 of the born every year in this country. 8% of the U.S. population, the fastest growing population in America today. I am amongst one of them. And we have become politically engaged not because we want to be. Trust me, as a 23-year-old and as a 17-year-old when I started, this was not on the forefront of my mind. But because we have to be. Because the politics and policy of our cities and country are threatening the very livelihood of our families. And that is atrocious. No 17-year-old should have to worry about that. No 7-year-old should have to worry about that. But in fact, they are. Now, I congratulate you all for bringing this resolution forward. But it's not enough. It's nowhere near enough. Especially in the light that our federal government isn't doing anything. Especially in the light that our state government isn't even contemplating a driver's license bill. Or that they've completely closed the door this year, at least, this legislative session at least, on a Trust Act statewide. Without those things, Boston, as the pilot program as the pilot city for this program, has a moral and political obligation to take some of the strongest steps of any city in this country. And we cannot avoid that. We can't hide from that. Because that's the fact. We started this. So we need to send a message to the rest of the country. There are localities in this country that come from the most conservative districts, from Chris Kobach's county, that have passed this. How can we say Boston can't? How can we possibly be right of center on this issue? How can we possibly be more inhumane than some of the people who speak most ill about our immigrant community, about us? Just yesterday, we had an immigration clinic in East Boston. Over 33 families were served, many of which came with ankle bracelets through the door, and many of which walked out being told that there was no possibilities for them to adjust status, no matter how hard and how much they wanted to work towards that day. Now, in the face of that, in the face of these folks walking out with no hope, it's up to the city to reestablish that sense of hope. For all of the community of East Boston, for all of the neighborhoods of Boston, and for the entire state of Massachusetts. Now, I don't speak on this as a political issue. I can't cite for you statistics. I could have done my homework. But the reality is, it's a human issue. And it's a human issue that Boston started. So Boston has to take the steps to end this. Thank you.
Good job.
Dina, Australia.
Good.
that's difficult to follow. I'm Dr. Nina Estrella Luna. I am a resident of East Boston. I live at 143 Saratoga Street. I'm also a professor of law and policy at Northeastern University, and I'm here today to build on some of the testimony from earlier, the legal testimony. It should be, I want to reinforce one major concept. The right to be free from arbitrary and unlawful detention is a 500-year-old principle in Western law. It's embedded in the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. It's a universal concept. It is in Article 9 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which the U.S. is a signatory. The ICE detainers violate this fundamental principle of law and human rights. And as was stated earlier, this isn't just my legal analysis of it. The Third Circuit has already found and made clear two very important things. One, ICE detainers are not required. States and localities have no obligation to comply with these detainer requests. Congress did not authorize ICE to order state and local officials to detain individuals pursuant to a detainer. More importantly, the Third Circuit found that the practice of ICE detainers is constitutionally problematic. Not just because of the Fourth Amendment violation, but because these requests violate the 10th Amendment's anti-commandeering principle, which prohibits the federal government from requiring state and local officials to detain individuals on behalf of the federal government, absent a warrant. So the practice of detaining individuals without a warrant violates some of the most important and cherished principles in the rule of law. But if upholding the rule of law is not convincing enough, complying with these detainers does create a civil liability to our law enforcement officers and to our police department. As was mentioned earlier, several federal district court cases and a number of local district court cases, local state court cases, have found that the police department or the officers themselves, the individual officers themselves, can be held civilly liable for unlawful detention when complying with an ICE detainer request. All of these cases found that being held on a detainer was a Fourth Amendment violation, but many of them, including a case in Rhode Island, which is currently under appeal in the First Circuit, also found that detaining people without probable cause is a violation of 14th Amendment rights to due process. More importantly, at least in my opinion, as the daughter of an immigrant, my mother has actually always had a green card, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she was always documented. Many of these courts have also stated that the legal status of the individual detained does not matter when assessing civil liability in the violation of constitutional rights. So, as it stands now, absent a Supreme Court decision, current case law states that holding someone based on an ICE detainer is unconstitutional. Complying with an ICE detainer request could incur civil liability for unlawful detention. So I'm happy to hear that you all support this ordinance. I would urge you to remove any unnecessary language, as was suggested earlier. None of those exceptions are needed. This ordinance will protect the city of Boston. It will protect our law enforcement agency. It will also, by the way, help us hold accountable individual police officers who do ask for papers in apparent violation of city police policy, which, by the way, does happen. We have testimony to that effect. And quite frankly, it's simply the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nina. And as we get to Lisette Lee, I'm going to call out 10 more names, if I could ask you to make your way down to this podium. Miriama White Hammond, Natalie Rengifo Alvarez, Maria Loa, Cesar Bach, Amanda Giacino, Mimi Ramos, and Gabi Camacho, if you can make your way to this podium, and then make your way to the podium to my left, Paul Peelan, Karina Wilkerson, Rosario, looks like it might be Omara, Salvador Sarmiento, and Jose Alvarez, if you can make your way to that podium. And Listen, you have the podium. If you could just introduce yourself. I know you're no stranger to the council and your affiliation, and you have the floor.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Councilor Flaherty and council members for giving me the opportunity tonight to submit testimony in support of passage of the Boston Trust Act. We congratulate Mayor Walsh, Councilor Zakam, and the members of the council for your leadership on this important public safety and human rights issue. My name is Lisette Lee. I live on Brent Street in Dorchester. And as a personal note, my family and I immigrated when I was 6 years old from Vietnam. So this is an important issue also for my family. I'm the political coordinator for Right to the City Boston. We are an alliance of community-based organizations representing many of Boston's immigrant and communities of color from East Boston to Chinatown, Dorchester, Roxbury, and Mattapan. Our core mission is to empower residents through grassroots organizing to be able to remain, to reclaim, and to rebuild our great city. Public safety, a sense of safety, is an important component to a thriving, healthy, and economically vibrant community. Yet we know across our city that many of us struggle to access our basic due process, our access to Fourth Amendment rights, and to racial profiling. Programs like Secure Communities further create the fear and mistrust in law enforcement. You all have heard and will hear tonight stories of residents who fear local police for things that happen in their daily lives and affect them and their families. No one should ever be afraid to call the police if they witness or are victims, especially if they are victims of a crime. We want to work with our law enforcement to create a sense of community. That is the basic right of our residents. Not to create situations where we isolate any resident for any reason. This is, as folks said, this, for many people, the majority of folks who are arrested for minor things. If a judge is going to set somebody free, why are we holding them and why are we allowing ICE to detain people? Again, I want to thank you for introducing this ordinance and to echo the recommendation to make amendments to the language that would call an end to all ICE holds in Boston unless accompanied by a judicial warrant. I want to echo what Andres said before, that this is an issue that affects young people, women, workers, everyone and people who hold up this city. We believe that Boston would and should be a leader and be a part of the national movement to restore trust in our communities. And we look forward to working with you on this issue and many others.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lisette. Mariama, how you doing? Good to see you. You just introduce yourself and any affiliation for the record.
My name is Mariama White Hammond. I live at 62 Romsey Street in Dorchester, and I am currently just a private citizen. I will be a student at Boston University School of Theology in a month. As it turns out, as a speaker, I'm not really an immigrant. I might be. My family may have been in this country the longest of anybody here. We've been since the 1700s. And as such, unfortunately, we haven't always had the benefit of the Constitution protecting us or public safety being in our favor. My family arrived here in chains, and even after we were freed, like many African Americans, we did not always find that the Constitution nor the public safety authorities were working in our best interests. I believe deeply in the Constitution, but I believe that it takes the efforts of citizens to make sure that the Constitution is actually enacted because it is a living document. 50 years ago, this summer, people like me and also many people from around the country had to fight to make sure that the Civil Rights Act was passed. That act was passed because there were many laws, particularly in the American South, that were in violation of the Constitution. Those laws were called Jim Crow laws. And I believe secure communities is an example of a current form of Jim Crow laws. I say that because I don't believe that it has the intention of holding up the greatest ideals of this country. In fact, I think it works in the exact opposite. That may not be the intention of those people who wrote it. It may not even have been the intention of those people who enforced it. But in our country, the burden of proof is not what your intention was, but what the actual effect is. And the actual effect is that it functions much like Jim Crow did in the South. I want to just call attention to the fact that because of laws like this, the black community has had poor relationships with the police, and those poor relations continue to this day, and they are part of the reason that we cannot stem the tide of violence in our community. So to think that another group of people would have laws put in place which could create that same kind of dynamic with the police after I and many other people in our communities have been working to change this seems ludicrous to me. It particularly seems ludicrous in the light of what we are experiencing right now and the mayor's big focus on ending violence in our communities. I also wanted to respond. I know I've talked to some of the police, and I know that many police officers say that in Boston we haven't been using it in the worst way. However, I also know that it just takes one bad incident for things to go in a terrible direction. I call attention to the Charles Stewart case. Maybe it was just one bad case, but I know about it even though I was too young to have really known it, and there are children to this day who still look back at that case. We don't need that kind of situation happening again here in Boston, just with a different community affected. So I think that secure communities, we just don't need it. And this Trust Act allows us to right a wrong that exists in the city right now. It allows us to overturn a law which, for whatever reason it was created, actually creates injustice and inequity as opposed to creating any kind of public safety. Finally, I think it's important to recognize, for any of us that do, I do a lot of work with young people in the juvenile justice system as well as adults. Our system is overtaxed and overcrowded. When you go, there's supposed to be speedy justice. I know people who are waiting 2 years for a trial. There is absolutely no reason to continue burying people in more paperwork because they're also participating in creating detainers. Finally, I have been to Nashua Street, and I have been to South Bay, and I've seen the families there, as I'm waiting to see somebody who's incarcerated there, waiting to see their family who are there under secure communities detainers. Both of those jails are severely overcrowded and underfunded, and I don't see why we would then put more people in those jails who actually haven't committed any crimes while we're really trying to find ways to move people out of our prison system into more effective monitoring systems that cost less money and are better for families. So for me, overall, while, again, I can't speak to the intention, the effect is to create a new kind of Jim Crow in America, and I don't think that Boston is the kind of place where we should be reinforcing that. Thank you.
It's time to recognize the City Council Sal Lamattina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I first want to apologize, everybody. I have an event in the North End that starts at 7 o'clock, so I'm a little late. But thank you all for being here tonight and sharing your stories. Those stories really hit home. And we will let my colleagues know your stories, and hopefully we'll have a strong Trust Act that people will live safe and feel comfortable in their neighborhoods. So thank you all for being here tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor Lamattina. Natalie? Oh, we're also joined by my colleague, City Council Tito Jackson. Welcome, Councilor Jackson.
My name is Natalie Rengifo Alvarez. I live at 75 Church Street in Dorchester. I want to thank you for understanding that the program Secure Communities has hurt the trust between our communities and our local police, and for taking actions towards a more secure Boston. However, I want to ask you to consider removing the current stipulated exceptions in Section 2B of the Boston Trust Act. Keeping these exceptions not only won't help to build trust between the community and the police, and won't help to improve public safety in Boston, but also is unconstitutional and sends the message that the police don't trust the work that the judiciary does. Please pass a bill that benefits all Boston residents and no one that keeps hurting us. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Paul?
Hi, good evening. My name is Paul Peelan. I'm a resident of Somerville, Massachusetts. I'm here in my capacity as Senior Program Director with the Irish International Immigrant Centre. And for the past 25 years, we have helped immigrants from Ireland and 120 counties. And I'm honoured to hear the personal and passionate testimonies of everybody here tonight in support of the Trust Act. It's been wonderful to be here tonight. I'm here today to tell you that the Irish community want you to pass this trust bill. We're hearing from families about a tremendous amount of fears regarding detention and deportation, echoing what we've heard tonight earlier. It's really affecting the Irish community where there's such anti-immigrant sentiment, and we really hope that the City Council passes this ordinance. And we stand in solidarity with the individuals and organisations that are here tonight in support of the Trust Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Maria Loa? Maria? Hi, Maria.
Hi.
You just introduce yourself and any affiliation, your address, and you have the floor.
Yes, my name is Maria Laura, and I live at 142 Beach Street in Rossingdale, Massachusetts. I'm an organizer and a volunteer for the Dominican Development Center in Jamaica Plain. I'm here to tell you that I have a friend that was almost killed by her boyfriend. She's undocumented. She was beat up all the time, continually, and she was so afraid to report it, to call the police, that he almost strangled her one night, that she had some neighbor called the police, and she was admitted Brigham and Women's Hospital, almost lost her life. And he kept beating her up, and she was so afraid because she thought she was going to be deported and lose her, her two children that she have here in the United States. So I just want you to take that into consideration for this security community program. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Amanda Giussino? Welcome, Amanda.
Good evening, councilors. My name is Amanda Jusino. I live on Meridian Street in East Boston, and I'm a member of Neighbors United for a Better East Boston, NUBE, which is a grassroots organization that works to empower residents in our neighborhood on issues that affect us in our daily lives. I want to thank you for the attention you're giving to this issue and the support, and also thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the Local Trust Act. First, I just want to talk about the sense of community I feel in East Boston. Councilor Lamatina talked earlier about the demographic of the neighborhood as being very diverse. And I just kind of want to paint a picture. So at the end of the day, I take the train to Maverick Station, and I might stop to talk to Jose, the bus driver. Then as I continue to walk toward my house, I'll wave to Zulma, who's working in the hair salon. I see people I know when I'm exercising at the Y. Sometimes I feel like it's something out of a TV show. I've really never had this kind of community anywhere else. And I really know my neighbors. And I know East Boston is a special place. I also know we have a lot of room to grow, and public safety is one of the places we can certainly improve. I want East Boston to be a safe place for me and my neighbors. I know we would be safer if we had more trust in our police and could feel comfortable reporting crimes. I want our police to serve as local law enforcement working with the community and not seen as ICE agents. I don't want to see my neighbors torn away from their families. I ask that the council help us rebuilding this trust and safety with our local law enforcement and support strengthening the Trust Act with amendments to only exclude people with open criminal warrants, as has been mentioned earlier. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Mimi Ramos?
Good evening.
Evening.
My name is Mimi Ramos. I'm the executive director for a local organization called New England United for Justice. We're a local empowerment group that represents residents that live in the Dorchester, Mattapan, and parts of Roxbury area. I'm also proud to be here and stand with groups like Nube, also the Chinese Progressive Organization. We're all members of Right to the City Alliance. It's an alliance of neighborhoods that represents the voices of people of color, low-income communities, and immigrant neighborhoods. You've heard many stories today, and I want to thank the families, before thanking City Council, for having the courage of being here today, sharing your experiences as well as stories, because that takes a lot of heart and courage. I also want to thank the City Council for your work in having this space to really understand this issue and hear how it impacts our communities, as well as the families that you're hearing from today, and for taking the next steps. It sounds like we still have some ways to go, but I think one step at a time. I want to come at this issue from a different perspective. I want us to think about getting robbed in the neighborhood, getting raped in our own communities, hearing gun violence in your neighborhood, and not being able to dial 911. And I want us to think about that for 1 minute. I think about the issues that happen in my community every single day and the stories that I hear from families as our organizers and community leaders go door to door, and the challenges that our neighborhoods face. And I think that Boston can do a lot better of a job in building more community and trust with local law enforcement and the residents that are a part of this city. I also want to look at this from a different perspective. I want to think about how police officers feel having to answer a call for help from a local family, focusing on their job, and then having to stop and say, oh, wait a minute, can I see your papers? I'm here today as an activist, as a community representative, but I'm also here because my father is a former police officer here in Boston. My father, Sergeant Allen, retired from the police department a few years ago. He is a local Irish immigrant from the Dorchester community, and he took pride in working in the neighborhood and building ties with the community and the safety of all the residents. He works primarily in Dorchester and in South Boston. He taught me the values of building in our communities, the need to really build unity and work with all walks of life. And he also spoke about the real challenges Boston had to face in his day around the racial divide that our city really faced. He told me many stories of how he would walk the beat and work with young people in the community that may have needed services or just a friend to talk to, and what that took, being an Irish, let's be honest, a white man walking in a black community, and how hard it took to really build trust with the local residents, the small business owners, and to really force other officers to think a little bit differently about their work. That must have took a lot of courage, and I know it wasn't easy. He worked with a lot of the Cape Verdean, the Latino, and the black families in Dorchester, Columbia Road, Uplands Corner to be specific. And then when he moved into South Boston, he had a different challenge to face. But he married my mom, a Latina, with 2 Latino children. He raised me since I was 2 years old. And as my father, I'm really proud of the work that he's done. And I talked with him about what Boston right now is facing, and he cried. It was really emotional because he thought about everything that it took back in his time to really build a city that could work with both law enforcement and residents, and what that took for the safety right here at home. We should feel proud to have such diversity right here in our own communities. And I want us to think about building a strong Boston in a fair way. I hear that the city and city council are taking steps in the right direction, and I look around in the room and I see all of the families that are testifying here today. We don't even have translation in this room. Let's talk about that. So I'm excited about the steps that you have taken. I want to thank you. I want to bring my father's spirit here into this hearing today. And I want to stand with Nube, as well as CPA and other members of Right to the City, to ask that City Council continue to do their work, to make this ordinance strong, to work for all families. Talk to the local officers, talk to the families, and hear what they have to say. But I also know that nobody in our neighborhoods should be afraid to call 911. And I think we can become a leader in that, both locally as well as step up nationally. Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi. Yeah. Abby, Gabby Camacho? Gabby Camacho?
Good evening, Boston City Councilors. My name is Gabriel Camacho, or Gabe Camacho. I live in Watertown on Boylston Street, but I'm a former longtime resident of Brighton. So I work for the American Friends Service Committee, and I'm a member of Unite Here Local 66L. First, let me thank Councilor Zakem for introducing the Boston Trust Act. We think this is a very, very important step, and we would also like to thank the co-sponsors. I come here tonight before this council as the son of immigrants, a lifelong union member, the coordinator of immigration programs for the American Friends Service Committee, a member of the steering committee of the Massachusetts Trust Act Coalition, and as an individual who has had run-ins with law, including arrests and convictions. As we all know, as was said in previous testimony, Boston first piloted this misnamed Secure Communities program back in 2006 before it was officially rolled out in 2008. It wasn't until 2 years later that the public learned through media reports that the federal program had been secretly activated in Boston. This is why, councilors, you have a special responsibility to do right by your constituents, including human rights activists, legal advocates, labor, communities of faith, and in particular, the immigrant community that has been so harmed by this program here in Boston. As the American Friends Service Committee asks this council, we ask you to eliminate Section 2 of the proposed ordinance in its entirety. Carving out exceptions takes us in the wrong direction. The national trend in municipal and county ordinances has been and continues to be not to honor detainers whatsoever without a judicial warrant. Boston should not settle for any less. It must be made clear to all residents in Boston that they can trust the police. It must be made clear that the Boston Police Department is not ICE. Section 2 serves no practical purpose whatsoever. It is counterproductive, harmful, and retrograde. Boston is where this destructive program was piloted. You can get it right, and you should not settle for lesser standards than the rest of the nation. It is within your power to do so. Use that power to uphold judicial standards. Use that power to uphold the Fourth Amendment. Use that power to maintain the presumption of innocence. Use that power to show what Boston is all about. Thank you. And before I leave, Councilor Flaherty, you asked a question to the first panel about, is there any data about immigrants not reporting crimes to police? There is a very authoritative study from the University of Chicago that indicates that the Latino community in particular is less likely by a factor of 44% not to report crimes to police because of lack of trust due to programs such as Secure Communities. That study will be on your desk tomorrow morning.
Yes, thank you, Gabe. Thank you for that testimony, Gabe, and look forward to reading that survey, that study. I also, Darlene Lombos, is Darlene still here? I know I couldn't necessarily make out the sign-in sheet here, but I believe it's Darlene Lombos. So if you're here, if you can make your way down. Karina Wilkinson, where's Karina? Is Karina still with us? Karina is invited to testify. Karina, is Karina here still? If you could make your way down if you wish to testify. Salvador Sarmiento.
Thank you. Great to be here, and thank you for the councilors for joining us and also for listening so attentively to all this important testimony. My name is Salvador Sarmiento. I work with the National Day Labor Organizing Network. I'm actually based out in Washington, D.C. I don't have a Boston address yet. I just want to make some very brief comments. The National Day Labor Network works supporting a lot of localities that are trying to do this. And we've been dealing with this for several years because we work with day laborers, right? Very low-income immigrant workers. If you're not, day laborers looking for work on a day-to-day basis outside a Home Depot, a paint shop, etc. And one of the reasons that secure communities came to our doorstep early on was because it was being implemented in places where local police, sometimes because they wanted to and sometimes because they were being forced to, were very indiscriminately targeting the low-income immigrant population. And secure communities was just a great program to do that. I mean, if we imagine secure communities as this massive dragnet, which is what it is, it's a way. The political sentiment today is that of the 11 million population of undocumented folks in the U.S., regardless, there's political things that may or will not happen in Washington, D.C., those people are part of our communities. Secure Communities is a program, despite how it's been described publicly, Secure Communities is a deportation dragnet that seeks to deport those 11 million people, utilizing local law enforcement to extend the arms of this deportation dragnet. And so what I want to say about that deportation dragnet is that it's a massive federal program, and so when the impact that such a massive federal program pushing police to do something has a huge impact, and you're hearing some of the stories here tonight, but I guarantee you this is the tip of the iceberg, because it is so difficult to capture and also to document, but it's so difficult to capture, and that's why the work that the organizers and the social workers and the attorneys that they do to communicate these issues is very impressive, because it's really difficult. It's a difficult thing to capture. I wanted to mention one particular case of a woman that's sitting up here. Her name is Sita Cepeda, and her son was taken from her at a very young age because he was actually racially profiled. He was pulled over, racially profiled. Well, he was racially profiled and then pulled over. And he was, because of an ICE hold, he was put into deportation proceedings, and he was deported, taken away from his family. And like that case, there's about 1,100 cases across the country. And those cases also happen in the city of Boston. And specifically about the exceptions, one of the reasons the exceptions are so important is that with the policy that we pass in Boston, we're setting an example. We're setting a precedent, more specifically a precedent. And so the way Boston goes, Suffolk will probably also go, right? And if Boston creates a couple exceptions, I guarantee you the next county that's going to pass one of these will add more exceptions. And if Suffolk adds a couple more exceptions, the following county are going to add a couple exceptions, right? And so it's very important that the cities where we can get a solid policy that protects due process for everybody, that we obtain such a policy, right? Because we are setting a precedent that other people, not only are they going to follow Boston, but they're going to chip it away at a little. So we have to create a strong policy that's a very bright line rule for folks to understand and to follow. And so the bright line rule is something that the police officer on the beat can follow, that the mother in her home doesn't have to think twice about calling the police. And that standard for everybody here today is very clear, and that's no warrantless detentions on behalf of ICE. Thank you.
Rosario Camacho. Rosario. Okay. Jose Alvarez. Come on in, Jose.
Good evening, everybody. I'm here on behalf of myself, Jose Alvarez. I live in 39 Meridian State, East Boston. I'm here because I want you guys to take a big breath and think about what you guys doing in Boston. You guys are new. Some of you are new in Boston. Mayor Menino, when he implemented this community secure, he didn't think twice. He didn't care. He is an immigrant like me and everybody else in this room. I have a big sample, and it's too bad that the commissioner is not here today. She left earlier. She said that when people, the immigrants, call the Boston Police Department, there are not being, when they brought people to court, okay, that's why the people on Boston don't call Boston police. Doesn't matter if they're getting beat up, because they are afraid that ICE is going to be at the door. I got big sample 2 years ago in 107 Chelsea Street in East Boston. There were at 7 o'clock in the morning, people were taking a shower, and the ICE show up with Boston police. Boston police knock on the door and said, Boston police, they have surrendered the house in Chelsea Street in East Boston. And they take those people on custody. They were looking for a warrant. The person that had a warrant, the person didn't live there any longer. So they took everybody on custody. Guess what? 2 weeks later, those people got built up. And whose fault is this? We are fighting daily basis in Boston. Now, we have a greatest captain who's working in Boston, in East Boston, that he take it case by case and consider it. But I want you guys, as you, Mike Flaherty, I know you for a long time, and, you know, take the big stop on, you know, and think what you're going to do. I want you to pass this law and be in Boston. Look at Somerville. Somerville passed it up. He went to the house, and they did it. Why us? We can do that. You know, as the mayor said earlier when he was running for a campaign, that he was going to support the immigrant community. So that's what I'm here today, for you guys to stand up behind us and help us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mario. Thank you, Jose. Cesar Buck, last but not least.
Yes, last but not least, so
Thank you. You were actually on the seat. You shined twice. I didn't see you on the first one.
Okay, it's all right. So good afternoon, everybody, councilors, members of the public, and members of the Latin American communities and immigrant communities in Boston, and allies. My name is Cesar Buck, and I reside at 13 Beale Street in Brookline, but I do work with Centro Presente as an immigrants' rights organizer. And I think that we've heard a lot of really interesting testimonies and a lot of different reasonings. So let me just add one more, but with a little bit of analysis on how I feel and basically how the story of my family has evolved and why we came to the United States. So I was born in Guatemala, and when I was 11 years old, my family moved here to the United States. And the reason why we moved is because we wanted to seek a better life. We wanted to have an opportunity to work. We wanted to have an opportunity to go to school. And we wanted to have an opportunity to be safe, not to be victims of crimes. And that's exactly what my family experienced in Guatemala. So we were fleeing that. Now, when we came to the United States, though, a lot of things happened. We noticed first that it was difficult to make a living because we didn't know the culture or the language. We did not know how to fit in. And we were constantly in fear of everything. So even going in school, you were discriminated against because I went to a mostly predominantly white school. And poverty was a big issue. So my family worked really, really hard to do the right thing for us. But the thing is that we were undocumented. So my dad was the only one driving. And at that point, any time that the police would come close to us, we really were afraid that they would stop us. And consequently, our whole life is lived in fear. So, well, as I was growing up, what happened was that I and my brothers excelled in school. We all graduated at the top of our class. And when it came time to go to college, we couldn't. Although we made it to Ivy League schools, my sister to Harvard, myself to Cornell, we really didn't have the opportunity to have that dream of going to a good school and contributing to American society. And why was that? Because the laws are unjust. Not only were we not wanted in Guatemala, but when we came to the United States, it was really difficult to make a living and to live securely and to have that sense of sureness that I'm sure your sons and your daughters do have. They can go to the motor vehicles registry and they can get a license. I couldn't do that. They can apply for financial aid. I couldn't do that. My brother and my sisters couldn't do that. And because of that, I think that when we have programs such as Secure Communities, they really affect the way that our psyche develops and how sure we feel in society. And the message that we're sending to the immigrant community is that you're not worthy enough, that you're not a human being enough to be looked at in equal terms under the law. And I think that we are saying all of that here. And I think that we have the opportunity to make that happen today. And that's why 5 years ago, I really decided to take it upon myself to join a community, to join an organization, and to really fight for the rights of all, my family included, because we don't have a voice. Nobody wants to hear us. Everybody makes laws that really don't have any traction because hardly ever, are we asked, is this law going to affect you? And how is it? And is it just? So I think that all of us tonight are asking that we step back and think about ourselves, think about our families and our communities, and think about what the relationship is between the police and human beings who deserve to have that sense of surety, who deserve to have good emotional development, and who deserve to live in a society where we can still be free, where we can still believe in democracy. So today, I think, that I ask the same thing as all of us, and I think that we must gain the trust of the community and the relationship between police officers and everybody else in the community. And I think that if our community feels afraid to call the police, to report crimes, then all of us in our communities, I think that we feel less safe. So let's do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Cesar. Did I miss anyone for public testimony? If there's anyone here that signed a sheet that did not hear your name called, if you could please indicate or forever hold your peace. Seeing and hearing no additional desire for public testimony. I know my colleagues have been extremely patient, particularly Ayanna Presley and Tito Jackson. So at this point, give you the floor if you have any initial comments or statements as we close out this hearing. Chair recognizes City Councilor at Large, Ayanna Presley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to, the gentleman that said that a report would be offered up, we read a lot of things in this work, and I look forward to seeing the report as well. And when you're talking about the human condition, it can be very difficult to quantify something. But just because you can't quantify something doesn't make it any less real. And ultimately, the best data is each and every one of you. All the time, we underscore this, that statistics are not what move policymakers. Stories do. And so I want to thank you for your compelling and authoritative stories. It is the most important data in our considerations of what to do next here. Certainly there has been an incredible deficit and breach of trust. When I think of a secure community, I don't only think about a community without threat and without unrest. I think a secure community begins with peace of mind. And from the stories we've heard today, very few people have peace of mind because of looming threats, because of fear and profiling and intimidation. When I think of the number of immigrant women, because I'm a survivor of sexual violence and do a great deal of advocacy in that space, who have reached out to my office, suffering already shame and isolation and the stigma that comes from being a victim of sexual or domestic violence, especially, in some cultures more than others. And then on top of that, to be re-victimized and feeling that you cannot even seek justice. Every day or every Wednesday when we come together as a body, we say the Pledge of Allegiance. And I always say that last line more than once, justice for all. Justice for all. None of us want to be hypocrites when it comes to that. And as a city that celebrates the fact that we are 53% people of color and publicly champions the contributions of many immigrants to our culture, to our communities, to our workforce, to our economy, the best way for us to honor the contributions of our immigrant neighbors and friends is not solely by flag raisings on City Hall Plaza or parades and festivals. That's a celebration of diversity. That's not an honoring. It's not enough in terms of the honoring of people. So again, I just want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. for advocating for yourselves, but also for the many, many more people who couldn't be here because they're second and third shift workers or because they were too intimidated to tell their own story. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Presley. Chair recognizes City Councilor Tito Jackson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I start with a quote by Pablo Casals, and he says, "The love of one's country is a splendid thing, but why should love stop at the border?" So I start, and I'm gonna ask that brother save paper. There's no need to bring that report to me. I've been a black man all my life, and I know what it feels like to be assaulted and to fear going to the police based on that assault. I know what it feels like to fear asking for help. I know what it feels like to see blue lights and wonder and think if I've done anything wrong. The hue of a man or a woman should not determine whether or not we call them or consider them a human. Each and every one of the people that we're talking about who are invisible to many, but are the folks who, in all honesty, support our economy. So if we want to tell it like it really is, the folks who are in and around our community who are doing lots of work that a lot of folks don't want to do, who take care of us and who make even this building a lot better and shinier. I want to thank the folks who've come forward today for their courage, not only for the courage that you have to make it better for you, but the courage that you have to make it better for folks who will never enter the walls of this building. We are committing a crime by employing this quote-unquote Secure Communities Act, because what we are doing is we are empowering rapists, we are empowering people who hurt other folks, we are empowering abusers, because those folks go free. They walk scot-free because the victims of their crime are not empowered
That's right.
to be able to go to the police. And I would just, end with, when we think about protect and serve, we should add everyone behind both of those words. We need to make sure that we are protecting and serving everyone, regardless of the documentation. And I would just note, oftentimes in the media, there's a word that people use that is inaccurate. They call people illegals. And I learned from Mel King a long time ago that a human being cannot be illegal.
Thank you, Councilor Jackson. And to bring concluding remarks, the lead sponsor, City Councilor Josh Staker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank my colleagues, Councilors Presley, Councilor Jackson, Councilor Wu and LaMartina, who joined us earlier tonight, and everyone on the council who's expressed support for the Trust Act, working with the mayor's office and representatives who spoke here today during both sections of testimony. I think, as Councilor Presley said, it's incredibly important to hear those stories. It's incredibly important when we talk to our colleagues who had other commitments tonight and couldn't be here to bring them those stories, to work together with the coalition, who I've had the pleasure of meeting with several times during this process, and look forward to continuing that discussion and making sure we have a strong Trust Act for Boston to make sure the city continues to be a place that is welcoming for everyone from every background and that people feel safe in their communities. So again, I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for conducting a great hearing as always, and thank you for your help and guidance on this.
Thank you, Councilor. So at that point, this concludes the hearing in the Government Operations Committee on Docket 1175, establishing a Boston Trust Act. This committee will be adjourned. I will be talking to the lead sponsor about the possibility of possibly a working session and or having something come out of committee with a consensus of the Boston City Council, and hopefully that earns the signature of our new mayor. So with that, docket 1175, Committee on Government Operations, will be adjourned. Thank you all.